Go.
Welcome everyone to the Or Umbrella podcast. We have I always say we have a very special guest, but we have a truly special guest today. We are interviewing our dad, John Mark Orr the First. Or as some people call him when he walks into a convenience store, John Mark Orr the Thirst. Because every time this man goes into a convenience store, you're looking at about a 200 liter Coke.
At least. Well, he has a 64 ounce. There we go.
There we go.
But then he has the bottles that for the refill, the bottle refill in each hand.
Absolutely. He's
Like
got to have as much fuel as possible.
That's
But
right.
to talk a little bit about our dad, he is a man who has many talents. His main um, his main goal in life, his main job in life, his main passion in life has always been ministry. He was a pulpit preacher for decades, and now he is the full-time director of HomeMission, which we're going to talk a whole lot about. But we're going to talk a little bit about your life. We're going to kind of see how you got where you are, some of the challenges, some of the ups, some of the downs, some of the good stuff, some of the bad stuff, some of the everything in between, and all of those kind of things. And I'm going to talk like this the whole time. Is that okay? Okay.
Well, why don't we let him talk first of all? Dad, welcome. Great to have you on our program today.
It's good to be on your program. I've enjoyed listening to your programs.
Well, good. We've got one fan at least, right, Jonathan?
Yes, one.
I just want you to know, out of all the podcasts I've ever heard, this is certainly one of them.
Be honest, Dad. How many podcasts have you heard?
Well, about 5 or 6.
Six. That's good. So I'm Michael Orr, Jonathan Orr, John Orr. Orr Brothers Podcast. We need to talk about the life and times of John Mark Orr Sr., the first, the original.
Exactly. We like to start off our podcast with the silly question. And so I want you to tell a particular story. This story is so unique to you because I don't know anybody who has anything like it. I would like you to tell us about your experiences meeting Colonel Sanders.
Well, before I went to preaching school, I was a manager for Kentucky Fried Chicken.
It's finger
And
licking
they had, of course, several, the ones who owned our Kentucky Fried Chicken in Cleveland, Texas, had about 200 franchises or 200 stores that franchise did. So they had all the managers come, and Colonel Sanders then gave the speech, and we all came and enjoyed a nice meal, and then we were going to leave the next day. I was very impressed with Colonel Sanders because he was bankrupt when he was 65. The highway went around his cafe, so he took his 11 herbs and spices
It's finger
recipe
licking
and went
good.
around and sold it and showed people how to cook pressurized chicken the way that he had fixed it, which was different than any other fried chicken out there. He sold it for a percentage of their sales. Eventually, there was a man that came along and bought this recipe and everything from him for about $2 million. But he reinvested that $2 million into a company called Henny Penny. And Henny Penny was a equipment company that they had a contract supplying all of the Kentucky Fried Chickens with their crest cores, with their fryers, with their tables, with all the things that they would use in a Kentucky Fried Chicken. So he became a multi-millionaire off of from Henny Penny, and from doing he would show up and he would advertise for Kentucky Fried Chicken. Well, I was impressed with that, so I wrote a song for him. and I put it on a reel-to-reel. That's all we had back then. That was before cassette tapes. And I wanted to give it to him that night. Well, he got up that night and he spoke to us and pretty much griped us all out of the poor quality of our gravy. And then he lightened up after a few drinks and started dancing on the table and put dry ice in his mouth. And anyway, everyone went around to shake his hands afterwards. He liked to drink pretty good. So I came up to him and I pulled out my package with my reel-to-reel song, and his guards took it and they were looking at it to see if it was a bomb. And anyway, I just gave it to him, shook his hand, and that was the end of it. And so I thought I was going to get up in the morning and just go back. Well, I get this phone call about 5 o'clock in the morning from my supervisor. And he said, "Get up, hurry, get your clothes on. There's a little man in a white suit that wants to eat breakfast with you."
Wow.
Got up and got dressed, went down and ate breakfast with him. And he was so gracious, kind. And he said, "Here, have a glass of orange juice." And I took it and like to spewed it all over the table. It was but anyway, the breakfast was good. And he asked me about my family and about how I like being a manager, and was very gracious and thanked me so much for the song that I wrote for him. And then I took a picture with him, and it was in the local paper, and I still have a picture of that today. So the lesson that I learned from that is a teaching in the Bible that if you give gifts, you can you can find your way into important people. If I'd never given him a gift, I would have never eaten breakfast with him.
Well,
And
God
He would have never.
liked orange juice.
Exactly. He
Yeah.
would have never spiked your orange juice.
That's exactly right. So in fact, here's the picture right here.
Oh, wow.
That
Can
is
y'all
so
see
cool.
it?
Yeah.
So anyway, it was quite an experience, and I met a few other celebrities around in my life, but that was probably the most memorable one.
And the most delicious.
Most of the celebrities I met are dead, and so is Colonel Sanders.
That's because you're old.
Yeah, that's because I'm old.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
All right. We wanted to get started today. Just talking about your childhood growing up. Can you speak a little bit about what it was like for you growing up, how your parents were, and what some of the most memorable experiences you had as a kid, and especially as it pertains to your faith and how it shaped your faith?
Well, my dad was a deacon in the Church of Christ and was very active. They held Bible studies with people. We had people over our house all the time. My mother was a great encourager, and both of them would build people up. My dad would take me over to old folks' houses and tell me to mow their lawn, said he'd pay me when I got through. So I mowed their lawn. When I got through, he said, then he took me to the ice cream place and gave me a nickel cone. I was expecting cash, but anyway. But I learned how to be benevolent, and I learned how to be kind and compassionate from my parents. We lived in a little town called Vernon, Texas. There was a population about 12,000. I think it's down to 10,000 now, a little farming community. And my dad was a farmer, and he contracted nephritis and almost died. And so after he recovered from that, he went into the insurance and real estate business for a few years. And then finally, his first love, he became a preacher. And he was a preacher for 6 years of his life in 3 different congregations. We almost went to India as a missionary after his first visit, or after his first church. They were also very welcoming to all people, no matter what their color of their skin. I remember in a time growing up in the 50s when it wasn't popular, they would have black children over at our house and we would play together. And, we grew up with Hispanic people and whatever. There was no different. My parents taught me that people were people and they all had a soul, and that's what I needed to look at was the soul, not the color of their skin. In fact, they never even talked about it. And so I grew up that way. And at a time when there was still a lot of prejudice. And so I taught you guys to be that way, and I've taught my family and everyone else to be that way and to be accepting of people, whether they're rich or poor, black or white, even if they're liberal or conservative or whatever, just to listen to people. Let's talk to them and ask about their interest and build them up and encourage them. And the Lord has used me through the years to bring many to Christ. And I pray that he'll continue to use me to do that. Because Jesus Christ is what we need in this nation. It's always been what we need, and we need it more today than anything to break through the hate and racial barriers that people have brought on us in this country. So growing up, that influenced my life. However, I saw some of the dark side of preaching, so because my dad wasn't paid very well. So I swore that I'd never be a preacher. It'd be the last thing I'd do. And I got into the restaurant business when I got out of college. And then I found out that that wasn't going anywhere. And then I worked for Rainbow Baking Company selling cakes for a couple of years. And the preacher at the church I was going to sent me out to this little congregation to preach on weekends. And as we say in the preaching business, that's when we got the bug. And he taught me into going to Preston Road School of Preaching to learn how to preach. And so for over 40 years, either paid or non-paid, I've been involved in preaching, youth ministry, outreach ministry for 13 years, for 8 years in Wichita Falls. And then for the last 4.5 years, I've been involved in the HomeMission, going around and working with small congregations that are struggling. And now we're starting to get requests from large congregations because they're struggling as well.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and draw back a little bit. We're going to get to all of that in detail. Michael, what do you have for us next?
Okay, so I have to say something about when you were growing up. First of all, you played chess. You were in the chess club, right, in school.
Yeah, in high school.
And then you were also a musical composer. You played the guitar and you wrote songs. In fact, recently you showed us a couple of reel-to-reels that you had of songs that you recorded and you wrote. And throughout your life, I know you've been a songwriter. You've dabbled in it, both Christian songs and different secular songs, love songs, things like that. Tell me about how music sort of entered your life and how it's been a part of your life throughout the years.
Our family loved to sing. And then growing up, we used to go to singings in churches all over. And when I was a teenager, we went in the Houston area, we went to every little old congregation out in the country with names that nobody's ever heard of, like Raven Chapel and Ranger Land and Tarkington Prairie and places like that. And we would sing. We loved to sing. As a teenage group, as growing up, I went to singing school when I was in junior high at Haskell Singing School. And so we've always loved to sing. And so I've always loved to write. I fancied myself as a great songwriter when I was in high school. And I even went to Nashville, and my cousin who lived there introduced me to the vice president of Monument Records, who had Roy Orbison and some of the other people that at the time. And he listened to a couple of songs that I had recorded by a man named Dale McBride, who had a popular song at the time. And he told me, he said, well, you got some good material here, but if you want to make it in the music industry, you need to move to Nashville and sweep streets at Opryland until you make the right connections. Well, I decided that I didn't want to leave heaven, the great state of Texas, and move to Tennessee. So I decided to stay, and I'm glad I did, because it wasn't long after that I decided to go to preaching school. Then we had a singing group, a couple of singing groups I was in, and one in the 80s, we called ourselves Hearts of Praise. And the song that we wrote most of our songs, and I guess the song we were most famous for was The Business Meeting. And it was a conglomeration of business meetings I'd been to. And any of y'all that have ever been to a business meeting, especially a men's business meeting, knows how ridiculous that some of the things are, going to some of those things. So
business meeting, of course, you know.
What's that?
For the uninformed, a church business meeting, not
church business meeting,
not
yeah.
a business meeting.
Yeah. So anyway, in fact, we opened for the group a cappella for a couple of years in a row at the Tulsa Soul Winning Workshop. And one year, Keith Lancaster of a cappella wanted to sing my song, but the other guys talked me out of it. And then the next year I told him he could, but it was too late. So anyway,
Then,
you know, mistakes you made. But I've enjoyed getting to do different things, writing songs, writing poems. But the most important thing that I've been able to do, especially lately that I've been cooped up with the COVID thing, is writing. Writing books and workbooks and things of that sort that we can use for HomeMission.
and at the end of our recording, I definitely want you to talk about some of those resources, the book that you wrote. I want us to give some time to that as well. But you know, it's so cool because Jonathan and I both, we're creative types, and we got so much inspiration from you, watching you write songs, you know, write poetry, do different things. And so, and of course, you mentioned we could go into great detail about your mom and how talented and creative she was, and how you got both things from your mom and dad in terms of that creative avenue. But I've loved watching over the years the things that you've produced and the things that you've done, both in church and in other ways. And it sure has been an inspiration for me and Jonathan both, I know. So we're thankful to be able to know firsthand all the things that you've done in your life creatively over the years. Jonathan, why don't you?
I'm thankful y'all are my sons.
Well, we're thankful that you're our dad.
Good men. You're good men.
Jonathan, why don't you take the next one?
Okay. I wanted to ask you about kind of rewinding back to your life. One of the things that has always been just inspiring to me is watching the relationship you have with mom. And I wanted everything you do, you couldn't do without mom. I think you'd be the first person to admit that.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you know, like the old show, How You Met My Mother? Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to meet mom, and just the relationship you've had with her over the years?
Well, we met in a little place called Mound, Texas. Well, we first met at church in Gatesville. And at the time, my dad had to get out of preaching due to health situations with my mother. And so he worked for the Gatesville State School for Boys. And then my mother was able to do that as well, using her artwork. And so my wife, well, she wasn't my wife at that time, Susie said, was invited by her cousin, Brenda. She said, let's go to Gatesville. There's a new boy that's moved to the Mound, and I want to meet him. And her grandmother, who lived at the Mound, says, yeah, I want you to come down here. I'm going to marry him off to one of y'all. So anyway, we met at Gatesville, and the first thing we did was get in a political argument and over church, politics in the church. And then I went over there and we played the guitar till about 1 o'clock in the morning. Then I had to get back up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That summer I was working out at Fort Hood, scraping paint on barracks. And so I didn't get much sleep when we first met. But anyway, I went back and I really liked her. She liked the way she looked, but she also had such a calming influence on me. She was relaxed and she was smart. And I always felt like she was just better than me. I mean, there's a song that came out several years ago called She's So High Above Me. Well, that's the way I felt about her. And we began dating, and then I proposed to her singing Make It With You, and then asked her if she'd be that one. And then I kissed her before she could answer because I didn't want her to say no. But she agreed to marry me, and this year will be 48 wonderful years that we've had together. And she's kept me out of trouble. I put that poor woman through so many different things. You know, I've preached at 2 locations. I had to provide part of my own support, and so I've had businesses and all kinds of things. And then even before I went to preaching school, I had a couple of restaurants that I started before I went to Kentucky Fried Chicken. And so we probably put 3 lifetimes into one.
Wow.
And she's been there, and she's just she's so smart, smarter than I am. And
that doesn't take much.
And she can, well, no, it doesn't. And she can, when I'm out of line, she can give me a look, and that pretty much.
Into that look.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to expand on that a little bit, because one of the things that has always been inspiring to me is like, so I'm a little volatile, which I get from you, obviously, not from Mom. I can get a little angry. I can get a little contentious. I'm very picky, and stuff like that, which are, you know, I get a lot of good traits for you, but I'm pretty sure that's straight from John Orr DNA. But one of the things that I've always been very impressed about is your ability to always, seemingly, or at least in front of us, remain calm, remain sensible, and remain loving towards Mom. Like, how do you go about doing that? How did you get to that point to where you were able to be so patient with Mom and basically never really argue in front of us?
Well, I finally gave up and realized you had to pick your battles. Because if I criticized her or yelled at her or do something like that, she'd start crying. And then I'd feel like a jerk, and then I'd beg for forgiveness, and then it'd be over with. So I just got tired I didn't want to do that. So I just picked my battles. And if she said something, or she kept talking, or she did something that would get on my nerves, I just would overlook it, because the opposite, it wasn't worth getting in a fuss over. And besides that, if you truly love somebody, you'll go out and if you have to go outside and beat a tree or something to get over your pin up anger, you will. But you go in and you treat the one you love with the same kind of love you want to be treated with. And so you pick your battles, and unless there was something I really had to talk to her about, I just let it go. It wasn't worth it. And when people fuss and fight today and end up getting a divorce, they're fighting on the wrong heel. It's not worth it. As someone said recently, mend it, don't end it. And you mend it by learning to be patient and learning that shouting or arguing or whatever it may be is not worth it. The best way to communicate with your spouse is by asking questions. And when you ask questions, then the person that asks the question is the person in control of the conversation. And then they ask the question and they move in the direction that you would like them to move if you're patient.
Very good.
I've just done that over the years, and then I also make it a habit to spoil her. And that's my job in life, is to, besides serving the Lord, is to spoil that woman. Tuck her in bed at night, cook dinner for her. Sometimes I wash the clothes or clean up, or whatever it may be. Or I'll do something really nice, or take her out on a date. You know, every married man needs to take their spouse out on a date somewhere once a week, even if it's just a taco place to get a taco, just to get away. We've done that all of our lives, had a date once a week. And we got that advice from a woman in a nursing home that was older than dirt, but she had a death grip. And she got hold of both of our arms and said, she said to Susie, you never let him leave home without kissing him goodbye, because that may be the last time you see him. And you never go to bed mad at each other. And that was some great advice.
Oh, yeah. So, Dad, I wanted to say, everybody that knows y'all, that are friends with me, they always say your parents are so cute. And it's, they're just, they say it's ridiculous how much in love they are and how sweet they are, So we're always getting compliments about y'all's relationship. And I know that, that's been a big part of our lives, that we married our spouses based on sort of the example that you set, and wanted to find someone that would complete us and fulfill us. So I wanted to move from that setting.
Before I leave that, I would just like to say the primary thing in our life that made it such a good marriage is that God is first.
Yeah.
And when I was dating her, God was first over me. And I've developed the same thing from her example. Her godly example has just saved me, because I wasn't so godly when I was in college. And, in fact, one time I couldn't get the window down and roll down, and I said a cuss word, and she said, "Let me out right now." I said, "Oh, no, I won't do that anymore." She said, "No, right now, pull over and let me out." Finally, just begged and pleaded with, I never have said one since. And that was when we were dating.
Wow.
So God has been the center of our lives, and God is much more important to each one of us than either one of us.
I think that's one of the reasons that y'all have had such a wonderful relationship, is that you love the Lord first, and then you give give yourself to each other as husband and wife. And I know y'all are a team. You talked a little bit about some of the crazy businesses you've had to try to ways to supplement income. And I have to talk a little bit about two things: about your paper company, Color Bright Paper, and about Christian distributing. Because for us, that was a really big part of our lives, and we dedicated a lot of time and energy into sort of being your right hand men sometimes, and sometimes more of a detriment. But tell us a little bit about some of the businesses that you were a part of during your ministry, and what kind of what you took from those experiences.
Hold on one second. You have to mention Taco Town as well.
Yeah, Taco Town. That's the original, the OG.
Well, actually, the first business I had was Mustang Vending Company. I owned a bunch of vending machines when I was in Abilene going to school, going to Abilene Christian College. And then I sold them, and after my dad died, and we moved to, he died at 47, so we moved to Temple to be in the area where my mother was. And I started Taco Town, and then after that I started Pizza Village, and then Ice Cream City, and some other thing, a game place. And I had too much going on.
Can I intercede for a second? Can
Yeah.
you tell us about the Taco Town jingle and how that came about?
All this advertiser talked about Taco Town, and he had a jingle about, he took the jingle from La Cucaracha, and he said, La Cucaracha, I love to eat at Taco Town. I don't know how in the world I ever let that. It was a bunch of radio commercials. I mean, La Cucaracha, as you know, is a cockroach. And equating a cockroach with Taco Town was not very healthy. And so, I don't know. We, anyway, finally packed it in and decided to go work for Dairy Queen for a little while, and then Kentucky Fried Chickens. It's ridiculous. So it was, I don't know, I put a lot in life. I should have gone to work for other companies before I opened up my own business. That was my biggest mistake. But you couldn't tell me anything back then. I knew it all. And I've learned through the years. Now, then in one congregation that was struggling financially, we started, I and two other couples started Christian distributing. And we went to churches personally and sold them church items, communion cups, even office supplies, kitchen supplies, curriculum, Bibles, all that kind of stuff. And then we sold out to Christian Teacher, bought it from 20th Century Christian, and I handed it over to one of the other investors, and they took over Christian Teacher. And then we moved shortly after that to Moody, Texas.
Moody.
My wife's dad had a heart bypass operation, and then my mother-in-law was Alzheimer's. So we moved there for a year to help take care of them. And then we moved to Corpus Christi to another congregation that could only pay half my salary. So at that time, from Christian Distributing, we had developed a way to convert paper called Color Bright Paper. And we began packaging it in saran wrap. And then finally, we bought a machine, a shrink wrap machine. we began selling it all over the country. And I even went and, but we were counting it by hand.
Yeah.
Still, we didn't have the machinery to do it, but we were selling it all over the country and built up a good business, and then had a place in the mall at Corpus Christi called Bright Ideas. And then I sold both of those and came out of it pretty good. We were able to purchase a new vehicle and a used truck in decent situation. And we went from there to Sweeney, Texas, and that was a good experience for us and for our kids, because I was working a full-time job and at the church, and working a full-time job with Color Bride and with Bright Ideas. So it was important that I spent time with my kids. I felt like my oldest son, Mark, suffered the most from that. I regret spending so much time away. And he really helped me work in the mall and with other things, and helped me work with Color Bright paper. And of course, he had gone on to, well, actually, he was already in college when Color Bright. No, he wasn't. He helped me some with that.
We would both work in the warehouse that you had, and I would count the paper. A lot of times he would collate. I would count, and my thumbs were conditioned for counting paper. I could count so quickly.
You could.
Almost like a machine at one
Yeah.
point.
Hey, all right. We wanted to get in. Sorry, we had to take a little break there. One thing about podcasting is sometimes things just happen. You know, my phone was running out of batteries, and I just drank an energy tea that made me have to use the restroom. So, yeah, Dad's like, as you drink that energy tea, I'm just going to slurp down this 48,000 ounce Coke. But continuing on, I wanted to talk to you about being a parent and what it's like to have the greatest son of all time is, I'm just kidding. What it's like to have such a glorious son such as me, and such a doofus such as Michael as your child. Now, tell me a little bit about being a Christian parent, being a parent and a minister at the same time, juggling that. You kind of mentioned that with us. You know, when you came to Sweeney, you had a whole lot more time with us and everything, juggling the businesses, juggling that. So just tell us a little bit about you and your philosophy, your mentality, your challenges, and how you felt like you faced those challenges in being a parent, a Christian parent.
I remember that I did a devotional one time when Mark was just a little baby at Avenue T Church of Christ on parenting. And I remember a man that was in his 50s that came up to me afterwards and said, I want to come back in about 20 or 30 years and see if you still have that arrogant attitude about parenting. Well, I could write a book on what I know about parenting and all the pages would be blank now. Parenting is a learned experience, and there's just a lot of times you just don't know what to do. Parenting requires a lot of prayer and a lot of love. I made a lot of mistakes as a parent. We tried everything out on our firstborn son, and we all like to drove each other crazy. And but he's always been a very respectful young man and a very responsible man. Not a young man, but he's younger than me. But I also tried to have, even as busy as I was, I also tried to have a monthly time with my kids. I'd take them out at least once a month, and it was their time. So they could pick out the place to eat, the movie to see, and the toy to buy. And so that helped out a lot. Mark always wanted to buy a cassette tape in the 80s. And then Jonathan always wanted to buy basketball cards or whatever. Michael wanted to buy the most expensive item on the menu of any restaurant that we went to.
I liked Mexican pizza from Taco Bell. That was not expensive.
Yeah.
That was my favorite.
Yeah, but the poo-poo platter was so from that Chinese place. Anyway, but and then little Janae, her first time to go out with her daddy was just a special situation. And she had on her little blue dress and her white shoes, and that was just a special occasion for me. All of them were. And so that enabled me to spend time with them and listen to them. And I had a practice that I wanted them to earn their first vehicle. Then I'd pay for the insurance and then help them with all their other vehicles. And most of the vehicles my children bought were usually hoopties. Jonathan called them that. And I had to buy about 4 or 5 cars or more before they got to where they got on their own, maybe more. Anyway, I've owned 58 cars in my life, counting the cars I bought for my kids. So anyway.
You had your own car lot, Dad. I mean, really.
I could have. I mean,
These.
I've redefined the term a good deal.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that before we you have always been, and this is something that always was impressive with me, and that impressive by the meaning that it made an impression on me. You for yourself, John Orr, are possibly the cheapest man I've ever met in my life. You buy the cheapest cars. You buy the cheapest shoes. I'll tell a little story and then I'll get to my point. There was a time where me and myself and Amber and Mom, maybe somebody else took you to the mall and said, Dad, we got to get you a decent pair of shoes that are not $5 from Walmart that will fall apart within weeks. And we went to the mall. We searched everywhere. We looked everywhere for all these shoes. And you're like, son, I'll be right back. And I'm like, okay. I come back and you're like, son, I just couldn't help it. I went to Payless and I bought these shoes, and you just talk about hoopties. These were the hoopties of shoes. We spent an entire afternoon to get you to try to buy a name brand shoe that's going to last, and you bought those hoopty shoes. But what I wanted to say, even though you were cheap with yourself and what you got, you were always so generous towards us. You mentioned buying us toys and video games, and I always had really nice shoes. And you worked very hard for those. But I just really wanted to point out that you're cheap. But I appreciate the fact that you were not cheap with us, and you always tried to give us the best, and really appreciate that.
My oldest son, Mark, inherited my cheapness. I'm proud of him.
I
He
did
can make a nickel squeal.
I am definitely the spoiled brat of the crew.
Amen.
All right, Michael, you want to guide us next?
Yeah, we talked about kids. We talked about raising kids. I wanted to get into ministry. And
By the way, about one more thing about kids. I wanted to make sure that they were always a part of a youth group. I told y'all to pick out one thing that you wanted to do at school. And I didn't want it to ever interfere with the church. We might have let a couple of things go a couple of times, but the church was always first. Being in the youth group, being involved in the Lord's church, going out and visiting with me, other people, doing things. I wanted to take you with me my dad took me, and to learn ministry side by side. And whether you ever became a minister or not, I just wanted you to be a good, faithful Christian to the Lord. So putting God first was the most important thing that I could ever give you, because I have nothing to give you when I die. But if I gave you the Lord, then I lived a successful life.
Well, I do want to say, Dad, first of all, we're very grateful that you gave us that intentive sort of a statement. I remember you telling me, "I'll always be proud of you as long as you're a Christian," and that was the message that stuck in my head when I became an adult. But I also wanted to correct Jonathan in that now you actually buy decent vehicles.
Yeah.
After I don't know how long, I don't know what happened. I don't know if a ray came from heaven and said, "John, you must buy a good vehicle to use for the rest of your life," but it happened. And we're very happy that you have a good, you had to, because you're traveling all the time now. And so you had to have a good vehicle. So we're very happy that you finally found a good, solid vehicle that you can drive around. We're very happy.
I didn't want to break down on the Kansas tollway.
It's probably
Stuck there for 3 days.
good thought. Yeah. You don't want to be in that position. So moving on, we talked some about kids growing up, about the busyness that you kind of faced. But I wanted to talk a little bit about ministry. First of all, when you first decided to go into ministry, and what was the appeal of being a minister? What brought you to the realization that you were in this world to be a minister of Jesus Christ?
I guess that when I started preaching in that little congregation in 1978 or 9, I think it's 1979. I don't know. I just, I really had to do a lot of soul searching, and I had a really good job at the time. I was making $25,000 a year in 1979. That was a lot of money. And, but I felt like that I needed that the things that I had learned and done, and I could best use my life and my talents for the Lord in ministry. And so, so that's why I decided to go into it. And then, and I've tried different types of ministry. Now, even before I went there, I worked with youth groups as a non-paid youth minister for several years. But well, I decided to go into it full time. Most of the time I was in the pulpit, but I've done youth work, outreach minister, anything that the Lord needed. I've even, as a pulpit preacher, I've cleaned toilets and the grounds, and driven people to places all across Houston and other places, and you know, whatever the Lord needs you to do. Ministry isn't about just sitting in your office and then pontificating on Sunday morning. Being a preacher is about being a servant. And so that's what I've tried to do my best.
So talking about ministry and doing your best, I know that you've had some health issues that you faced and grappled with, some things that you inherited and whatnot, you genetically, that has made being a minister doubly hard for you. For instance, I know you have Tourette's, possibly ADD, some of those other things that I know Jonathan got some of. How has some of those health issues you faced over the years been a challenge for you in ministry, and how also has it been an opportunity for you to truly show, you know, God's power working through you?
Well, if you're watching this video, you've seen two of my tics. One of them is my head jerk, and the other one's hitting myself in the jaw. I counted over 50 tics that I have in Tourette's. Some of them are vocal. One of them even has to do with cursing, and I don't even know it. But the only person in my family that's ever heard that at any time is Jonathan. And it was one day, and I was just, we were at the food bank picking up food to go help people with it. And I just let out a string of curse words. And Jonathan said, "What did you say?" And I said, "I didn't say anything." "Yes, you did, Dad. You said blah, blah, blah." I didn't even know I did it. So, that's been one of my biggest fears, is that being a preacher, if you let out a string of curse words, you're not going to be a preacher anymore anywhere. But it never has reared its ugly head subconsciously around anyone, including my wife, for 48 years. So God has been the one that has kept that in check. And if he didn't want me to be a preacher, then I would have had more problems with it. It's just I'm in pain all the time. Not severe pain, but I have arthritis, especially in my neck and in other parts of my body. I have diabetes, but thank God it's under control right now. Along with Tourette's syndrome, I have ADHD, OCD, mild depression, restless leg syndrome, and now a new one's come up called ET, which is essential tremors. Thankfully, I don't have Parkinson's yet, but who knows? And the way I look at it is I'm blessed to have those things, because the Lord says that in this life you will have troubles, but fear not, I am with you, and I have overcome. And so we grow by our troubles and our cares. And if I let Tourette syndrome bother me, then I would be an invalid. I mean, I could be on SSI all my life and just lay around. But that's just not me. I can't do that. I have to always be busy. I can't sit still. I probably couldn't sit still for 5 minutes unless I was watching something or talking to somebody. And but it also has given me compassion. I've heard that people with Tourette's are very empathetic toward other people, and I try to be that way. You feel what other people feel. If you see someone, if you're around someone else with Tourette's, you want to pick up the tics that they're doing. But I feel sorry for them and very empathetic, and it's helped me to be empathetic toward people with mental diseases and things of this sort. And none of the Tourette medicines work for me. They came out with a new one I was just diagnosed with by a neurologist I went to a couple of weeks ago, but my insurance won't pay for it. It costs $2,400 a month. So I'll just keep on living with Tourette's. I do take one pill for the other stuff, and it's a small dosage, so it doesn't conflict with anything. So I'm very happy with it. And if I die, and I'm 67 years old, however long the Lord wants me on this earth to serve him, that's how long I'll do it. And I'll just keep on with these tics, and as long as it doesn't bother anybody else, it doesn't really bother me that much. And so in ministry, now sometimes when I'm by myself, I'll shout out. And but people get used to it. They think it's strange at first, or I'll make tics or noises. I'll walk into a bathroom, and if you think about a tic, you want to do it. That's the problem with Tourette's. And so, but when I'm preaching or leading singing, it doesn't bother me. And so that's an amazing thing as well. And I feel like it's given me an edge in another way too. I look at things differently. And I think anybody with any kind of mental, emotional, or neurological disability has an upside. They have a creative side. And so that's given me, I feel like, an edge in figuring and problem solving on difficult biblical passages, and trying to help people problem solve their things in life, and writing curriculum and things of this sort. So I don't regret it at all.
Absolutely. Talking just a little bit more about ministry and transitioning into what you're doing now. So you preached for 20 years, 25 years.
I preached from, you start in 79 all the way up till 2007.
So nearly 30.
That would be almost 30 years.
Okay, so
And then
yeah.
The other after that.
So tell me a little bit about how your mentality while you were a pulpit minister, your mentality while you were preaching, your love for evangelism, and how that led you into making the decision to bring up HomeMission. And then after that, we'll talk exclusively about HomeMission.
Well, it goes back to my parents. My parents would show Bible film strips on the wall and play one of these little records that would ding when they would turn the handle of the film strips. And I remember seeing those things. And then I began doing that when I was a young man, studying with people and learning. And I always had a passion for trying to lead people to Christ, because that's, there's no other reason to exist in my mind. And, or at least that's the most important reason to exist. And so preaching, it bothers me today that we don't spend enough time training preachers who go to school to evangelize. And many of them are frustrated preachers, and the congregations are frustrated. And as a result of that, we're losing 70 churches of Christ a year in America, and 8,000 to 10,000 denominations are closing their doors in America, because most preachers don't know how to evangelize and are afraid to, because they were never taught when they were going to school, and they never had a passion to learn it. And
just real quickly before we go on, just for those viewers who might not be familiar with the term, when you say evangelize, what are you talking about?
it means to study the Bible with someone and lead them to Christ.
Okay.
And to help them stay in Christ.
So that passion for evangelism, when you took the job at Faith Village in 2007 as an evangelism minister, as opposed to a pulpit minister, well, let's pause that for a second. Tell me about starting a church, because church planning. You and some other men started a church from scratch in Meadville, Texas, in the year 1999. Can you tell me a little bit about church planning and how important it was to evangelize when a church is brand new like that?
Well, it was a little difficult, because the Church of Christ had tried to plant a church there since the 40s and never had been successful. People had tried. And we felt like it was time. People were starting to move out that direction from Houston. And God brought several of us together, and we worked on it. And we had a lot of young people in that church. And we grew from just a small handful of people whose first meeting was under somebody's tree in their backyard, to renting a building. And that's a tough thing, is finding a place to meet. And then we bought a building. The Baptists in Needville were very gracious to work with us on buying their old building, as long as we kept the painting of the Jordan River that the Baptist preacher's wife from 70 years ago had painted. And we said we had no problems doing that. We were happy to have it. And that building's paid off now. And we grew from just a handful of people to over 110 at one time that God had blessed us with. And 80 people were baptized into Christ during that time of 7.5 years. Then I knew I needed to leave because they needed to stand on their own 2 feet. They had elders by then, deacons. And
Now, your initial plan was just to stay there 2 years, right?
yes. And so
And that turned into 7.5.
yeah. Well, I mean, I was going to stay there as long as I needed to, but we stayed there probably a little longer than we wanted to, but we felt like we had to get them to the point where we could leave and they could support a preacher full time. And they did. They've gone through some rough spots, but they're still doing well. But I wanted to spend more time learning about evangelism, methods, things that could help other people, and then going into teaching other people to evangelize. And that's what ultimately led me to HomeMission.
And now that you're still there? I thought you just froze up for a second. I'm like, wait, what? Michael, you want to continue on?
Yeah. So we're talking about that transition. I know Faith Village was a great launching ground for you. You learned a lot from the process of creating an evangelism program there, getting people involved, training people. So tell us about all the things that led up to eventually you going into HomeMission, from the starting point being your time at Faith Village.
Well, God gave us about one new Christian a week, baptism a week, over those 7.5 years or 8 years. We also had a tremendous drought for 6 years, and Wichita Falls almost folded. I mean, that's how bad it was.
And you're talking about a literal drought.
Yeah.
Literal drought, and the lakes dried up to less than 19%. They were having to recycle our sewage for drinking water. And we almost lost the base, the Air Force base. And if we lost the base in the school, that'd been the end of Wichita Falls, pretty much. People were moving out left and right. We lost 700 members in those 6 years.
Wow.
If the Lord hadn't blessed us by adding those each week, the church would have been down to hardly anything. So the Lord knew what was coming, and the Lord knew why we were there, and the Lord made great things happen. And still a very good, solid church, and they have a very evangelistic preacher, Chris Winford. But we just had a passion. All the churches we'd worked with, we'd worked real hard to build them up, and then when we left, sometimes they would go back down, or they wouldn't keep going, or they wanted to try something different, and it just didn't work. You have to evangelize. If you quit doing it, then the congregation's going to go down. And so we began seeing how desperate the situation was in the churches, and how much people had gone astray from the biblical days of the 50s and 60s. even the 70s. We ran across a preacher's wife who ran into a young man who was raised in Vermont who had never heard the word Christian before. And you just think in America, you can't even believe it. But that kind of thing, those kind of pockets are growing more and more. And so we began, my son-in-law and daughter, Andrew and Janae Friedel, was in a small church at the time, and they came up with the idea of HomeMission probably about 2 or 3 years before we got into it. And they had a couple of guys that didn't know what to do with themselves. So after college, so they sent them around to help congregations, and eventually both of them were hired youth ministers. So it went dormant for a couple of years, and then Susie was on the verge of retiring as a school teacher, and the church in Faith Village helped us get started, and we raised support, and along with what they were helping us with, and it was a pretty big struggle. We had to use up a lot of our own funds and borrow a lot of money, but you have to do that anytime you go into something new. And we had our first year last year of not being in the red financially, so that was a great year. But we just barely made it to the finish line. But thank God we made it. But we've gone since we started 4.5 years ago. I've worked with about 15 different evangelists in some way or another. 2 of them have passed on and gone on to their reward. Collectively, we've worked with 250 churches in 40 states. Susie and I have been as far north as, Vermont.
Canada, right? Y'all were in Canada.
No, we didn't go to Canada.
Oh.
But one of our evangelists did.
Okay.
We went as far east as Florida, southeast as Florida, as far west as Colorado, Minnesota. We helped a church get going there in Minnesota. We work with 5 startup churches. And we have a couple more that after this COVID thing gets over with that we're going to help get started. So all these experiences in life, the businesses, the having to work and preach to, having to, in some congregations, starting a congregation, all the things the Lord has used to train me and my wife to be able to do what we're doing now. And HomeMission has grown to the point of where we're getting about 1 new request a week.
Wow.
Congregations that are as small as 2 to a congregation of 2,000 that are requesting help of some kind. We have just recently finished the outline of a new project that we're going to start to get evangelism into all the churches of Christ. And that's called the Great Commission DNA Project. It's a 3-year project, and we give the churches the materials that they'll use weekly, quarterly, and then the evangelists will come around and do 5 workshops during those years. And it's designed to bring them from a congregation that's about to close or a congregation that's declining to a congregation, as some of them have, doubled and tripled in size.
Wow.
Now, some of the churches we started with have run into trouble. They've lost their preacher. They've had struggles and fights. And so we go back and, congregation never never stays the same. It either grows 10% a year or it declines 10% a year or splits. And that's the worst thing that can happen. And so working with congregations, the HomeMission model is taken from Acts chapter 11, where Jerusalem sent out Barnabas to go to Antioch, and he encouraged, equipped, and evangelized the brethren. And many people came to the Lord. And then he went to go get Saul, which later became Paul, the apostle. And Antioch, not Jerusalem, sent them out on their first missionary journey. And so this is the pattern that we go by. We're the traveling evangelists, like the ones in the first century. It's an association of evangelists. It's not an organization, but an association. We have our administration team at Faith Village. Currently, my wife and I are under the West Freeway Church of Christ elders in Fort Worth. And for those of y'all that remember, a little over a year ago, we were in attendance when a shooter came into the building and killed two people, two members of there. And so it's been a little unnerving. Plus, my wife and I were in a pretty bad accident in April. And so Susie had 2 surgeries and I've had 1. So we're still recovering from that. But God is with us, and we are we're excited about when all the things are lifted, that we can get back out on the road. And we're trying to get more evangelists around the country to work with us. We're getting calls all over. I got a call a couple of weeks ago from a church in California. Before we started this interview, I was talking to a man from the church in Indiana, preacher, that wanted us to come and help. We have a church in Caribou, Maine that wants us to come and help. Florida, we have several churches down there. We worked with 7 churches in February. And we have an evangelist there. He and his wife are doing a great job. So there's people all over. We work with churches in Iowa, 40 states. We've even been to Alaska. And next year, my wife and I, no, year after next, I'm sorry. My wife and I will be married 50 years, and we plan to go on our 50th honeymoon to Hawaii. And while we're there, we're going to work with the church in Kauai.
Oh, wow. I wanted to point out, I apologize. There's, this is becoming a hot podcast, and my cat has just really wanted to be in this. She's trying to hog the camera right now. And so I apologize for Rogue coming and cuddling with me and getting in many of the shots. So people watching this on YouTube will see a whole lot of Rogue, and I apologize for that. She's just very interested in what you have to say. I wanted, since we have you, that was one of the biggest stories of the year, with everything that happened at Faith Village. How has I'm curious, because I think people hearing this interview and realizing you're there and that's who you work for, how has this church reacted to what happened with the shootings? What have you learned, and what have you how has that affected you, or inspired you, or encouraged you, or redirected your focuses? Or tell me a little bit about that experience and how the church there is, really dealt with it.
Well, it's just a prelude to what's coming, to coming attractions. There are churches that are being burned to the ground. They're burning Bibles today. People being attacked physically. Ministers have been attacked, but it's always been this way. Preachers have always, especially if you preach the Bible and everything in it, you're going to be attacked. And I've been attacked and threatened before, but I haven't been through a shooting. This was my first one. And then, of course, COVID followed that, and they've really struggled in getting it to open back up. But we've taken advantage of whatever situation that there is. There's always a silver lining that God presents. And it's been a drain on us, but life goes on. And we learn from these experiences. And I just want to tell everybody out there that's listening, if you are a disciple of Jesus Christ, a follower of him, Jesus said, you will be persecuted. And we have a lot of people that are being persecuted today for just because of who or what they are. But I'd rather be persecuted for being a child of God and standing up for Jesus Christ and loving other people than to be persecuted for saying hateful things. We deal with, and what we're dealing with now is nothing new. In the 60s, when I was a teenager, there was a lot of horrible things happening, especially in Detroit and other places like that. And today, other cities are going through those horrible things. I've never seen anything like shutting down our nation because of a disease, but anyway, it's something that we're going through, and it helps me, and I think other people realize that there's only one life. It will soon be past, and only what's done for Christ will last.
So saith the poet.
So saith the poet.
So to wrap things up, we really appreciated you opening up and being on our show. I mean, you're not going to say no to your sons, though. I mean, maybe Michael, but not me. Anyway, but so how can people find out about Home Mission? And also, I want you to talk about your book. I died last night, and where they can find that as well. Like where's the source? Where do you go to find more about Home Mission?
Well, if you go to homemission.org, O-R-G, you can see all about Home Mission, places we've gone to, people that have written about us, what we do. We're about to have that redone. There'll be a lot more material. We have a small YouTube channel. If you just look up Home Mission on YouTube, I explain all about Home Mission in 30 minutes. But that Home Mission channel is going to contain a lot more material as time goes on that churches can use. We're also going to be starting a school of evangelism at West Freeway Church of Christ beginning in August of 2021 for local people locally in the area. And then for graduates of universities and preaching schools, will be able to come and attend the Home Mission School of Evangelism in 2022, in August of 2022. We'll also be having a Home Mission intensive training evangelism camp in October 10th through 16th of 2021 at Camp Pettyjohn Springs near Mobile, Oklahoma. Beautiful facility, great camp. We'll be putting up more information on that very soon. We also have 2 workshops a year. We moved our workshop from Faith Village in Wichita Falls to Waxahachie, Brown Street congregation. Revive Us Again is an evangelism and church growth workshop the last of March and the last week of March. And then the Equip workshop, which has to do a lot with training Bible school teachers, the first week in September. We had to cancel both this year, and we were very sad that we had to, but we're planning on going full blast with them next year.
And also, Home Mission on Facebook is also a great source of information. You'll find daily scriptures on there and information about everything that goes on. So make sure to look on Home Mission Facebook as well, and all of those. And lastly, talk a little bit about your book, I Died Last Night.
And well, I'll say that my wife keeps up the Facebook. I'm computer illiterate. For all your listeners out there, this is about as far as I've gotten on the phone. on the cell phone. So I'm happy with that.
It's good to know that your grandson has almost the same exact model as you do on the flip phone.
He does. He does.
He could probably
And
do more than you.
he can. He can. I'm
But
not a good
he does more
texter.
than me sometimes. So
About 4 or 5 years ago, I wrote a book called I Died Last Night. I made it about a deacon in the Church of Christ that went to hell. You know, the reason I did was because I didn't want to, I knew that people from all different kinds of beliefs would read it, and they did. There's about 69 or 70 different comments on it from people of all different kinds of faiths on Amazon, and you can buy it off of Amazon.com. We also have a publisher you can get it from, and we're going to be starting a home mission type of bookstore pretty soon. It'll be a small type of thing, but there'll be several types of books that'll go on that, and we'll be letting everybody know on Facebook when and where that'll be. But it's I wanted to carry, it's a fictional book based upon scriptures and some of the comments that early church fathers said about torment and hell. And I didn't write it to necessarily scare people, but the Bible says that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And my goal is actually to get people to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength. And that was the purpose in writing the book. So it's sold several thousand copies. I don't know how many. You know, it's not New York Times bestseller list, but a lot of people have read it and used it. And we, by the way, on HomeMission, the churches that we work with, we don't ask any pay from them. They don't have to pay our expenses. They don't have to pay for our materials. I just learned that we gave out around $70,000 worth of free materials to churches last year alone. And so we have congregations and individuals that support the work. And so we are very grateful for them. And we're always looking to add new evangelists to the cause.
Dad, thank you so much for letting us interview you today.
Thank you.
We suggest you to check out everything that's been talked about. We'll put some links in the Or Brother podcast, Spotify, and YouTube show as well. Dad, thank you so much. Michael, do you have any final words?
just, it's funny. I've known you my whole life, but I think I learned a lot of new things about you just sitting down and talking. And, our podcast, our Umbrella podcast is about interesting people who have done interesting things. And my goodness, your life has been interesting and just an inspiration for other Christians. And we're thankful for your example and for all the things you said today. I think it'll be something that people listening will really enjoy to hear.
I thank you, and I'm proud of both of y'all.
Thank you.
Doing what you're doing.
We love you, Dad. This is going to be a dual podcast for the Or Umbrella and the Or Brothers. So until next time, guys, we will see y'all later on.
Bye-bye.